The following program contains scenes and language of a frank and explicit nature. Viewer discretion is advised.
This is The Loudness, where our random, rowdy, and raunchy band of misfits create top 10 lists of life's most insane shit. Be scared. Nothing is off limits. So congratulations.
You just made the list!
I'm the music god CJ Plain. This is The Loud List. Once again, back is the incredible. We're going to do another top 10 list that rocks. Back with us again is Mr. Bill. No, not that Mr. Bill. He was in a prior episode a few weeks back. I don't even remember what we discussed. What did we discuss?
We discussed sports movies.
Sports movies, yes. I think that video just dropped. So
last week.
Yes. So
by the time they hear this, it's been a month ago.
Yeah. Well, few weeks. Anywho, we're going to get into another list. This is leaning much harder into his side of the Great Lakes. Being Canadian, he is probably going to have a much better handle on the top 10 greatest Canadian artists. I put Canadian rock artists, but these are not going to be strictly rock artists. These are just going to be Canadian artists across the board. Mine are kind of a mixture of rock, country, Americana, and a few other random styles. Don't know about his list, but
I'll tell you my methodology. My methodology was I went out on the deck, I smoked a joint, I came in, I wrote 20 names down, and then I put them in an order. That was my list.
I wrote 10 names down. I wrote 12 names down. And then I added a third one to the honorable mention a minute ago, and then I had to change it because I realized I had forgotten probably one of my favorite Canadian artists. I'm not going to say he's the greatest, but probably my favorite. So with all that said, give them a background on you. For those who didn't hear the first episode, tell them who you are, what you do, where you're from.
Where I'm from, when I was 18 months old, I moved from Montreal to, no, I'm just kidding. My name is Bill Van Vagel. I'm a podcaster. I've been podcasting for about 7 years. I'm on a podcast called Land of the Creeps Horror Podcast, where we review kind of irreverently horror movies in different genres and different years. I've also just launched my own podcast called Music, Movies, Sports, and Stuff, where we go over music, movies, sports, and stuff, whatever's in my mind. One of the Land of the Creeps is about 4 to 6 hours. Mine is about 2, 1.5, however much I ramble. But the other thing I've done is I've been a guest host on a lot of shows, especially ones with music. And so music is one of my core passions in life. And so anytime I get the chance to talk about something I know and like, bring it on. Canadian music has so much depth, so much variety that I wouldn't say that it's underappreciated in the US, but there are certain bands and areas that just don't get the exposure or just don't break through. So I was on another podcast last week and we talked about our top 50 albums from the 90s. And I must have had 25 of them were Canadian. So and that was just due to I was in high school and the exposure, and I was in university and the exposure and seeing live bands at the bar and that kind of thing. So I've run into enough of these musicians just happen to buying a beer and, hey, look, that's Jeff Healey or whatever, so. But let's get this going because I am very curious because I love the fact that you researched it and somebody looking from a fresh lens, someone looking at it, without any biases. I'm very curious what's on your list.
Yeah, so the majority of these on my list, I've been a fan of for years. 2 of them on my list, I didn't realize were from Canada. Longtime fan of them and didn't realize they were Canadian. So
you found a spot for Skinny Puppy, did you?
Actually, no. But 2 of them I didn't realize were Canadian. I thought they were from someplace else, and they ended up on my list because I thought, oh, okay, who'd have thunk it? So one I thought was from New York, one I thought was from Louisiana, and was completely wrong on both of them. So to begin it, I'll let you start. Go ahead and run down your honorable mentions.
Honorable mentions first. All right.
Yeah, we'll do them first.
I forgot. You like to get them out of the way with at the beginning.
Yeah.
And I'll be curious how many of my honorable mentions made your list. You don't have to tell me or anything. Okay, the one that was my number 11 that I hemmed and hawed about was Leonard Cohen. I almost put him on the list. Tom Cochrane / Red Rider. Stompin' Tom Connors. Probably don't know him. 5-man electrical band. I had as an honorable mention. Band called Blue Rodeo, a singer called Kim Mitchell, who was also in Max Webster. Loverboy. Exactly. You know it. See? I've seen him.
Dude, that is
I,
Kim Mitchell and Max Webster did not make my list merely for the fact that there were so many other ones. There are a number of their songs that I have really great high school memories to. And that is one of them. Like that. Go for a Soda is just one of those songs. When it comes on the radio, you have to just.
well, have you heard Patio Lanterns? Those patio lanterns, they.
I probably have. I just, like I said, I have a really, like I said, I have a soft spot for Kim and Max.
Well, what I like
because-
about Kim is when he was done, basically with his creative instructional putting out albums. He was a DJ on the big Toronto rock radio station Q107 for
nice.
years, and then he finally got back. Like you can see him at Toronto area rib fests, but he's great. He's fantastic.
Yeah.
Loverboy,
Son of a bitch.
Our Lady Peace, the band. The band was all Canadian except for Levon Helm. Everyone else was Canadian. So they're almost secondary Canadians. Larry Gowan, I don't know if you know Gowan. He did his own thing for about 20, 25 years. And he's been the last 20, 25 years the lead singer of Styx and the keyboardist of Styx.
Oh, yeah. Okay. That's where I know the name from.
Because Styx was playing a show, I think they said like in Niagara Falls or something, and Larry opened up this show for him, and they said, this guy's got great energy. And then they were battling with Dennis DeYoung, and he ended up being the guy. And then I made mention of a couple individual singers that are Canadian, but I can't put on a list. David Clayton Thomas was the lead singer of Blood, Sweat, and Tears. David Stone, if you've ever seen any of the footage of Rainbow, he was the guy playing the Moog, playing the Moog. That was David Stone. And John Kay, the lead singer of Steppenwolf. He was Canadian. So those are my honorable mentions.
Okay. Well, I just added a fifth one to my list because dumbass me forgot Loverboy.
Got Mike Reno?
Dude, there were so many names on the list, and I'm like trying to write them down and trying to keep them in order, and I just completely overlooked Loverboy.
Loving every minute of it.
You know, the funny thing is, as much as I like Loverboy and like their music, Mike Dean did a solo record in 1989 that probably was as good or better than anything Loverboy did. It was really a hard rock record. It was really a record that, for the most part, came into that sort of Kiss, Slaughter, Cinderella style. And when it came out, the reason I bought it is Mike wrote with Paul Stanley. He wrote the song "Sword in the Stone," which was featured in the Shocker soundtrack, and he did his own version of it on there. And of the 3 versions of that song, the one by Bonfire, which was on the soundtrack, the one that Kiss recorded, and the one that Mike Dean did, Mike Dean's was actually the heaviest, most guitar-oriented of the 3. And
you heard what happened to I think it was the bass player. He went out fishing out on the West Coast, and they never found his body.
who was that?
The bass player from Loverboy. I think it was one of the band members. Yeah, he went missing in the water. They literally couldn't find him.
So,
but they're still kicking around. There's still 2
yeah.
of them.
Oh, yeah. And it shocked me because when I got that record, the Mike Dean record, I expected it to sound like Loverboy, but it ended up sounding much more like a Cinderella or Slaughter record. Like it was truly a hard rock record. It wasn't a rock and roll record. It was a hard rock record. Like he was rocking out. Like he was.
Well, Mike always had the voice.
Yeah.
It was just a matter of, what else? Okay, who else is your...
So first and foremost, I'm going to say this. I'm going to get this right out of the way. Feel free to send as much hate mail as you want. Nasty comments and all of that. Number 1 on my honorable mention list is Rush. Purely out of respect for their career, who they are, and what they did. I am not a Rush fan. Rush is a band that I have seen live. Great live band. But just overall, I'm not a fan of Geddy's voice. Geddy is right up there with Robert Plant as a voice that I can listen to for about 3.5 minutes, and then it's like nails on a chalkboard. So they will make my list just purely out of respect for who they are, what they've done, and obviously I know 99.9% of people are going to put Rush as number 1. That's fine. I will admit their Roll the Bones record is my favorite. There's something about that record that I just really
Jack, relax, get busy with the facts.
I don't know why I like that record, but don't care for the rest of them. But second on my honorable mention list is a band probably nobody else will have, but that I have always loved. It's a band called Helix. I have two female country singers. One that I absolutely love. One, I don't listen to her music that much, but I respect the hell out of what she's done as a person, what she's done as a musician, and all of the doors, walls, and mountains she kicked down. So the first one is Anne Murray. The second one is Katie Lane.
I remember when she came up, and she was kind of like, she hadn't come out, I don't think, as lesbian yet. So she was all countryed up. She sang her voice really high. She was almost like a kind of this oddball, and you're like, where is this going?
Yeah. So Katie is somebody musically, I'm kind of 50-50 on, but I respect the hell out of Katie for what she has done as a person, as a musician, the boundaries she broke, and just the door she opened for other people that would have otherwise never been considered or even looked at by a label had it not been for sort of Katie and Lyle Lovett doing it first. And
I think her who
Lyle Lovett?
Lyle? No, he's not Canadian.
Yeah, okay. I didn't think he was. I know they kind of came out together and they toured a lot together, so I couldn't remember.
Well, I think Katie's irreverence and her outgoing personality, at least to start, kind of got her out there. But ultimately, if you've listened to her do Constant Craving or Hallelujah, these kind of things, like she's just jaw-droppingly amazing. Right.
That's what I'm saying. I mean, she's an amazing musician.
And I'm glad
style that I would listen to all of the time, which is why I say I'm kind of 50-50 on her, kind of have to be in the mood.
She did a really good version of Crying.
Yeah.
And I'm glad you put Anne Murray on there because we were talking about her beforehand. A lot of people crap on her for the style of music she does, but she broke open a lot of doors. What's funny, though, is when she came out, she was considered country. And she was like in Canada, she was always considered, the country singer, but everyone just knew her as Anne Murray from Nova Scotia, But
she did the song when she did the song "A Little Good News." That was the song that I knew her long before that, but that was the song I remember specifically standing in my grandfather's kitchen, the old AM clock radio that he listened to, and I was standing at the stove cooking eggs, and that song come on. And I sat the spatula down and I was so enthralled in the song because the lyrics, rolled out this morning, something, something, something. And, it was the way her delivery in that song was so enthralling. And it immediately, it made me think, my grandpa always listened to Paul Harvey and and now for the rest of the story, it made me think of Paul Harvey when she sang that song. Because her delivery was, it was almost that, here's the news story, but there's more to it. And it's a little good news, and
she does a really good version of the Monkees' Daydream Believer.
Yeah.
If you can find
She's got a hell of a voice. There's no
doubting it, but she's very gentle, very petite, very, and that kind of a voice. I don't know that would get around these days. I don't know.
She,
But another thing that that most of your audience might not know, in Canada, we have what's called CanCon. You have to have Canadian content. And I don't know what the percentage is, but on the radio, you have to have 1 out of every 4 songs, I believe, to have either been Canadian sung, Canadian produced, Canadian written, that kind of thing. And that came out in the early 70s. Pierre Trudeau put that out, I believe. And so it was to promote the Canadian industry. But the problem is the people that were big, a lot of them the ones we're going to talk about, they complained about getting played to death because there weren't that many. So you had to play the ones you had out there. And I can remember certain artists, when we get to them, writing the government saying, you got to stop this. My stuff is getting, overkill. So some of these bands you heard a lot of in Canada, whether you like them or not, because they were Canadian.
I have Loverboy on my list. You mentioned Loverboy, so I added them. But the last band on my honorable mentions, I didn't know they were Canadian. I've listened to this band for 30 years and had no idea they were Canadian. It's a band called the Day Glow Abortions.
Oh, the Day Glow Abortions, yeah.
I did not know they were Canadian. And obviously, they have a song that strictly says they're a Canadian band. And why that didn't register with me, I have no freaking idea. But
Well,
I had to.
if you're a punk guy, you probably have listened to DOA.
Yep.
Yeah, and they're from Vancouver.
Yep.
And
Snafu,
the other band I
41.
should have the other band I should have mentioned, and it's not usually my style. I can appreciate the Bare Naked Ladies.
Yep.
And
Propaganda is from there. Teenage Head. Simple Plan. I didn't know Simple Plan was either. I thought Simple Plan was from California.
well, and was it Sum 41? They're from
Sum 41 is
Ajax,
from
Ontario.
there.
Yeah.
Chicks Dig It is another band that I listened to a lot. They didn't realize was from there. The Real Mackenzies is an Irish punk band. I thought the Real Mackenzies were from Yugoslavia. I didn't realize they were Canadian. So there's so many.
I mean, you can go back to Guy Lombardo and the Canadian Orchestra
Yeah.
back in the 40s. I mean,
those are my honorable mentions.
honorable mentions.
So with that said, let me prepare real quick. Who is your number 10?
My number 10, you actually mentioned as an honorable mention.
Okay.
And that is a band that, if I'm just looking for good time music, this is going on, and that's Helix.
Nice.
Helix, you know, everything from heavy metal love to ROCK will rock you to Deep Cuts the Knife to what's the old Foot in Cold Water song? Let me do anything you want. The lead singer, Brian, what's his name? Brian Vollmer, is classically trained as operatic. And he had a voice at his peak that was amazing. The band, when I got married, I hired a band to come play our wedding, and they had opened up for them at a club. And they said Brian Vollmer's voice got so high, it popped the speakers.
Yeah.
He busted the speakers because it was just a small club and they weren't prepared for him. So they also have a couple videos. If you do your search on YouTube under Helix, for a couple of their videos, they put out the video that would be put on MTV. They also put out the video that they would just keep, and a couple of them have topless women. Like they had some, I wouldn't call them X-rated, but you know, like there would be breasts around. That was Helix. That's just what they were. So I loved Helix. So yeah, they're my number 10.
Nice. I considered Helix for mine, and I started breaking this down in my mind. Okay, am I going to go record sales versus impact versus popular songs, whatnot? And I sort of leaned more towards, since we were doing the greatest Canadian artists, I sort of leaned towards the artists that had a combination of record sales, but also had a sort of a major influence on our other artists. So I balanced just the two, and a little bit of it was just because I liked them. Number 10 for me is a band that my uncle had one of their records, and to me they always sort of reminded me of Slade a little bit, and they had that sort of fun, big bombastic sound that went between, you know, good time rockers and sort of sappy ballads. It's a band called Trooper.
I highly considered them for my number 10.
Yeah. You know, I think everybody's heard "Raise a Little Hell," raise.
And the boys in the bright white sports car.
Yeah, so they reminded me of Slade, and I'm a massive Slade fan. So I had to put Trooper on mine just because.
We're here for a good time, not a long time.
Right. They were such a fun band, and still are such a fun band to listen to. They never took themselves too seriously, and they just really were a good band to listen to when you just sort of wanted to hear something that, I don't want to say was nonsensical, but when you wanted to hear something fun that didn't take itself too seriously.
Yeah.
You know,
I had this conversation with my buddy on his deck the other week, and I said, I'm going to be doing this. And I said, I've got my top 9, but my 10 I'm kind of wavering on. He said Trooper. He said, say Trooper. So there you go. It's one of those bands I haven't seen, and they played my local town, well, the town over from me, but they were charging like $70 to see Trooper. And I was like,
wow. Yeah, I don't.
No, 40, sure. 70?
Yeah. I don't even know if I paid 40, honestly, to see Trooper. Like,
well, I'd say 40 if I was going to sit there and have dinner and then watch it, and, you know.
Yeah.
But I'd have to be pretty, I'd have to have a certain frame of mind. Although, you know, you can watch Trooper anytime.
Yeah. But they were such a fun band that, you know, I had to go with them.
Yep.
Almost went, and I didn't put them on my greatest list. They didn't really have any hits, but it was very sentimental to me. I almost went, instead of Trooper, I almost went with the band Slick Toxic.
Oh, they're Toronto band, aren't they?
Yeah. Nick.
They're still kicking around too.
Well, Nicholas was the singer. He took over in the band Moxie for a while. And I'm good friends with Nicholas, and I make fun of Nicholas because Nicholas is sort of like a couple other people. He has the Rick Springfield, Dick Clark thing going on, where Nicholas hasn't aged since 1988. If you look at a picture of Nicholas Walsh today, he looks exactly the fucking same as he did in Metal Edge magazine in 1988. And it's
Is he still in the industry?
Oh yeah,
Is he?
so he has this group now. It's a theater group, and they recreate famous records. So they've done like Bat Out of Hell. They've done Night at the Opera by Queen. They've done Houses of the Holy, and different things. But he still plays with Moxie on occasion because the guitar player, I can't remember his name, from Moxie, still has Moxie going. So I almost put Slick Toxic just as a sentimental pick because they were one of them bands from that era that I love to death. They never made it big, but I always thought they were as good or better than Guns N' Roses. So
it wasn't that long ago I saw them put out a promo, like they were coming out or they were cutting a new record or something like that.
I think you're thinking of Sven Gali.
Oh, maybe I'm thinking of Sven Gali. Maybe you're right. Yeah.
So Sven Gali put an actual record out, and they went in the opposite direction of where they were back in the early days. They went from hair metal to just straight out being a metal band now. They did a cover of Spellbound from Triumph and just crushed it, and they are like fucking heavy now. They're almost like Sad But True Metallica heavy now. So they leaned into the heaviness.
Yeah, and that's another band.
Sven
awesome. Gali's another band that just never quite broke.
Yeah.
Never quite got that, that one golden chance to get on David Letterman or something.
Super nice guys, though. I interviewed them on my podcast a while ago.
Oh, did you?
Was very happy about that. Them and Slick Toxic were both bands that I admired a lot.
Yeah, because they were both from the Toronto area. They both came up about the same time. They would have played the same set of clubs, and
both signed to Elektra Records.
Oh, did they even did they have the same agent?
Probably.
So,
number 9. Who do you got at number 9?
Number 9 is one you just mentioned 30 seconds ago. Triumph. Triumph is a band that kind of unfairly rode the coattails of Rush. I wouldn't say rode the coattails. People confused them. Not because they were both hard rocking 3-piece bands. But that's pretty, and they had very uber talented musicians. But that's about where it stops. Because after Rush's initial album, they went in a more proggy kind of direction. Balancing. Hey, look at that.
I had no idea that my Apple Pencil was magnetic. Oh, I'm sitting here and the screw just like stuck to my Apple Pencil, and
there you go.
Like I had no idea my Apple Pencil was magnetic.
But Triumph was kind of, doing their thing, and they got invited at the last minute to the US Festival in '83. And they played on the same stage. I think it was the same day. They had the US Festival had, if I recall correctly, certain days had certain themes, and Triumph got thrown into the heavy rock section with Judas Priest and those guys that were on that day. And it's all on YouTube, and they just rocked out. They were phenomenal. Rick Emmett as a guitarist, you talk about falsetto voices. He can hit the high point while playing a double neck in front of 130,000 people. The guys, sometimes they get caught up as they're called a hair band because they did have big hair. They're no hair band.
No.
These guys could rock you. If you ideally, Triumph is best to see in about a 10,000 seat arena, because then you get the fog machine and the lights and the sound stays within. It's blues-based rock with an edge. Yeah. But the other nice thing about them is they had Mike Levine on bass, but they also had Gil Moore on the drums, who also sang. And if you listen to the song "Follow Your Heart," that's all Gil Moore.
Yep.
So it's to me an underappreciated band. If anybody puts a list of underappreciated bands, I always have Slade. Yeah. I always have Triumph. It's two that just never quite got the respect. Not even the respect, the exposure that they should
Yeah.
have.
Yeah, I'm a massive Slade fan.
Oh,
So,
Naughty is hilarious.
yeah. I
And
I
what's
get so much shit because I've always referred to Quiet Riot as the world's best Slade tribute band. And people
Come
are like,
on,
"Blah, blah, 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 blah," and I'm like, I'm sorry. Like, they get so offended by it, but I'm like, come on, dude. Quiet Riot's three biggest hits were fucking Slade covers. Were, like, and to say that Kevin DeBrow does not sound like Naughty is, come on, dude. Like, they're, like, I don't know whether it was intentional or whether it wasn't intentional. All I know is you can't listen to Quiet
and their
Riot without.
versions were pretty good.
Well, yeah, I mean their versions were great,
Yeah,
but
but
again,
that's not theirs.
But again, Quiet Riot absolutely does not exist without Slade. I mean, it's that simple.
Or they would get stuck down in they would be Striper. They never quite get above a certain level,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. So
They would be Slick Toxic.
yeah, number 9 for me. You mentioned him in your honorable mentions. This was another one that I did not realize was Canadian. I thought he was from New York. That's Leonard Cohen.
Lenny.
Yeah, I don't know why, I thought Leonard Cohen and Tom Waits were both from New York. I know they're friends and running buddies. I just, for some reason, I just always thought Leonard was from New York. So number 9 for me is Leonard Cohen, just because.
That voice.
Yeah. And I am waiting for Cradle of Filth or somebody. One of the last songs I recorded, what the hell is the proper name of it? You Want It Darker. I am waiting for Cradle of Filth or somebody in that style to record a metal version of You Want It Darker, because that song just screams metal to me. Like, it just, the tone of it, the lyrical style of it, just to me screams somebody like that. Somebody like maybe Ghost, or I don't know, just I'm waiting for a metal band to take that song and do something with it.
But he sounds like he's just smoked 18 Marlboros.
Yeah.
He's had a couple shots of whiskey. He's been working in the factory, but he comes out in a suit and a top hat.
Yeah.
But I mean, once you hear him sing Suzanne Takes Me Down to a Place Near the River, you're hooked.
Yeah.
I mean, you hear Closing Time, you hear Alleluia, like he's a panty dropper from the most unlikely guy you'd ever think of in the world.
Him, and I always group him with Tom Waits because Tom is the same way. Tom, nobody will ever accuse Tom Waits of being a good singer, ever. But you can't listen to Tom Waits and think, holy shit, that dude is a badass songwriter. Like,
well, it was funny when I was on the podcast the other day talking about the 90s, I said, wouldn't it be cool if there was a tour with Tom Waits and Nick Cave? Wouldn't that be an interesting?
That would be a crazy
between
show.
The storytelling and just sitting on stools and playing. Like, jeez. All right.
Yeah,
my number 8 is a band very much like Triumph in the sense of mid to late 70s to mid to late 80s. They broke, but not as big as I think they could have. And that's April Wine. I adore April Wine. April Wine is a band that did a few covers, but they also did their own thing. Miles Godwin as a singer, as songwriter. You could go to their show and you go, oh, I don't know them. And you know 8 of their songs. They're just that band. They could do anything from touching love songs to I Want to Rock. And just, unfortunately, Miles died last year, but he handpicked a singer to sing in the band. And I think they're touring Europe with BTO or something. Like they're still out there. And another band that I didn't put on my honorable mentions or something that's like that is like Chilliwack. You know Chilliwack?
Yeah.
Yep. Same kind of thing. But I think April Wine kicked it up a notch. I think they were just recently nominated in the Canadian Rock and Roll Hall of Fame or the Songwriters Hall of Fame, one of that kind of thing. So they did, they did a live album from the El Macombo Club in Toronto before they made it huge, that you can literally hear the beer glasses clinking while Miles is. I love April Wine.
I really need a sound effects board of some kind on here because I just have to do this just to sort of prove a point. Number 8 for me on my list
is April Wine.
For why? So for much the same reasons as you said. I know they had their songs that they were known for and whatnot, but the moment in time that made me love them, the first time I saw the movie Fright Night, when that, every night I rock myself to sleep. That song is just, it's right up there with Go for a Soda. It's one of those songs, when it comes on, you gotta crank it up. You just kind of gotta, you gotta do that Wayne's World thing with it, man. Like it's just a banger of a song.
See, to me, if you see the live version of Sign of the Gypsy Queen, oh,
Right.
they're,
But
they're,
I mean,
yeah.
there's so many good songs that they've done, that it's an endless list for them. But that's really just one of them songs. Like, I think partly because it was in that movie, but it's also one of them songs that it's really not about finesse with that song. It's just them being just a great rock and roll band, and it's just that catchy 80s style anthem type of song,
If there's anybody listening, seriously, who's never heard April Wine, don't just take it from a bunch of old guys like us. Pick up the record, the CD, stream them, do them in their, I'd say their vintage of about 78, 79. They are at their peak of their skills, and April Wine.
They should have been
bigger than they were.
Yeah, they should have been.
But they got cut up. They got cut up in the same kind of thing Triumph did, where there were a lot of bands of that ilk.
Yeah.
All kind of coming out within about 7, 8, 10 years, and you get lost in the shuffle. And I think that's what happened.
So yeah, my number 8 is April Wine. So we matched on there. I need a soundboard or something where I can do like a bell or a ding ding ding.
That's called post-production, Chris.
Yeah. All right, number 7. Who you got at
number 7 is one I figured was the one you were scrambling to put on, and that's a musician that when anybody says, who is the most underrated guitarist, you probably don't know. I always bring up Jeff Healey. Yeah. Always. And Jeff was, for those who didn't know, Jeff Healey was blind.
Yes.
He was born with sight, but lost it early in life. And he went to school for the blind and the deaf and the hard of hearing, that sort of thing. And he taught himself to play guitar on his lap.
Yes.
And he wasn't handed anything. And he started on, I don't know, local TV, got into the clubs in Toronto, worked his way up, got a reputation. He was very, very famous for playing the clubs in Toronto and doing Jimi Hendrix covers. Yep. Fantastic. His cover of All Along the Watchtower is legendary from the early 80s. Yep. And then he got the ear of Stevie Ray Vaughan. And there's a video of him doing Swing Out Little Sister, I believe it is. Yep. And Buddy Guy, they love, like the blues guys loved him.
Yeah.
And when you listen to, I did a countdown a couple of years back on a podcast of my top 5 favorite love songs. Angel Eyes was number 1. It is a phenomenal song, cruel little number, confidence man. You can, and the thing is, he shifted after about 93 or 94. He got into the more jazz.
Yeah.
And
so
he used to have,
I was getting ready to point out.
Yeah.
That,
and
he was...
Jeff Healey had a bar in Toronto called Healy's. I don't think it's there anymore. But I remember going down there one time, and Jeff wasn't down there, but the guys from the Pursuit of Happiness were singing down there. And it was a small bar, but the acoustics would have blown your ear off. I hate saying this again, but if you have never seen Jeff Healey play, you need to see him play.
Yeah. So I have 2 things to say. I have Jeff Heyer. We'll get to him. 2 major things. One of my favorite movie lines of all time is the one from Roadhouse where, Patrick Swayze is, you played pretty good for a blind guy. And he's like, yeah, and I thought you'd be taller. So, I mean, it was such a great delivery, the way he delivered it. And the whole interaction in that movie of how they incorporated the band into that movie.
Well, I liked how they had him playing behind the chicken wire.
Yeah, like it just, it was such perfection. Like there were so many little things about Roadhouse that is what made it. It wasn't that it was Sam Elliott and that it was Patrick Swayze, that it was this person. It was little things that just made it authentic. If you've ever been to a Roadhouse, if you've ever been to a Blood Bucket type of bar, you've ever been to those shows that were at a motorcycle club.
If you've ever been to a bar where you're not sure whether you want to go in, but the music lures you in, that's...
Yeah, and it was really authentic to so many little aspects. The small details are what made that movie great and special. It wasn't overly produced or overly whatever. They didn't try to wipe the grime away and make it shiny. They left it the way it was supposed to be. It was supposed to be dirty and dark and dusty and dingy and it was
and smoky and sweaty.
yeah.
And, and
Um,
that's
and while the remake wasn't terrible, all the bad parts about the remake were the fact that they tried to shine it up and make it this fancy South Florida thing with
I didn't have the heart to watch it. I just couldn't do it.
It wasn't nearly as terrible as I thought it was gonna be. It didn't have any of the.
Did they have a blind guitarist?
Actually, no, they had a reggae band.
A calypso for
yeah, it was sort of a calypso reggae band, which fit because the bars in South Florida and the Panhandle and but it was that type of thing is what they got wrong. They got all the action parts right, but it was the whole tropical breeze, the bars on the beach, coconut hut type of thing, and it was like it doesn't have any of the blood and guts spirit that the other one had, so yeah, I 100% agree, Jeff Healey. I love that guy. I actually got to see him live. I saw a live show, and he played sitting down, he played standing up, played behind his head, played with his tongue. He was an absolute.
You knew when he was excited and in a groove when he stood up.
Yeah.
When he stood up, he didn't give a shit what he looked like. He was playing. That was what I love.
Yeah. Jeff is a badass. And, I'll get into more.
You'll get into more. Who do you got for
number
6?
7 for me?
Or 7.
You probably have him higher. I knew the singer's music before I knew the band's music because my uncle had a bunch of his solo records. So number 7 for me is the Guess Who.
Okay.
I knew Burton before the Guess Who because my Uncle Marty had a bunch of vinyl records of like Burton Cummings solos. So I knew his solo music. And then my uncle said one day, hey, you should check out, the Guess Who. And I was like, who the fuck's the Guess Who? And my uncle's like, so he pulls the records out. And I was like, oh, I didn't realize it was the same, which was funny because I also was a big fan of BTO. I didn't realize Randy Bachman was
all the ramifications.
Yeah. So I'm sitting here listening to the other stuff before I actually listened to where they kind of started and ended up at this point where they're at now. So number 7 is the Guess Who.
Yeah, the Guess Who is a band that when I was growing up, my dad used to call them Chad Allen and the Expressions because that's what they first were. There was Chad Allen. Yeah. But then Chad Allen, early on in the career, he decided to go on and get a real job. And so they became Guess Who. And yeah, there's great stories. How American Woman, that song started, was they were playing a curling club in Northern Ontario. They were doing a gig. And Gordon was out in the back, I think, smoking a joint and looking at records with one of the audience members. And the band was up on stage playing, and they needed to kill time. And that's how the evolution of how American, and then you just started bump, 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 and then the rest is history. But that's how that song started. That was the first Canadian song to go number 1 in the States, American Woman. So, okay. From here on in, my top 6, I consider Canadian rock royalty, my top 6. So my number 6 is one that when they asked Bob Dylan, who's your favorite songwriter? This person's name came up. When everything was going on in the heyday of the 70s, he stayed relevant. And he stayed relevant up until the day he died about 2 years ago. If it was 2 years ago, it might have been a year and a half ago. And that's Mr. Gordon Lightfoot. There is not a person that's going to say that the influence he had on Canadian music wasn't influential. And I mean, my favorite songs by him is Black Day in July. And Black Day in July is all about the Detroit race riots of the late 60s. But you go to Sundown, If You Could Read My Mind, all the way down. He had song after song after song. He was a drinker, which got him in trouble a few times, health-wise and otherwise. It affected his relationships. In fact, the song Sundown is about somebody peeking around the back of a girl he was going out with at the time. And he had, but very, very soft-spoken. He only ever had a couple band members that he trusted and kept with the whole time. Uncle Gordy, the Aurelia Oriole, could whistle like nothing. And just to sit back and listen to this, the Edmund Fitzgerald is about a 7-minute odyssey while not all the facts are 100% accurate, they were about as accurate as he could do to make it fit into the song. So the wreck of the
It's
Edmund
pretty-
Fitzgerald, yeah.
It's pretty accurate.
Yeah, the only thing I heard was wrong was I think he said they came out of Minnesota, but they or Wisconsin, like the port of entry or something, the departure port wasn't the exact one that I think was used.
Yeah, I say they left Duluth, so
Yeah, Duluth. Yeah. I can't. I heard that was slightly off. The other thing I heard about that song is, for the longest time in the song, they talk about one of the mates forgetting to close the door, and when he forgot to close the door, the water rushed in. And for years and years and years, the mother of that boy was heartbroken, and oh, how could my son have had that happen? And due to his mistake or whatever, proved it wasn't. It wasn't him through when they went because somebody went back like a Jacques Cousteau kind of deal, and they found it under the water. And they were able to prove that it wasn't, but. Yeah,
okay.
hell of a song, hell of a singer. I love him.
I didn't realize they'd ever found it. I thought it was too deep.
No, they did find it, but it was, it's like if you can find the Titanic 80 years later, you can.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
I got news for you. Yeah, if you've never been on Lake Superior, it's a whole different beast, bro. Like
Like you can understand why they all went down.
So here's the thing: as the guy from Michigan, I'm not a swimmer. I like the beach. I like frolicking in the water, but I'm terrified of deep water. But I have been on the ocean. I've flown over the ocean. I've been out on cruises and different things. And, if I'm on a boat, I'm not generally overly scared. But I have stood on the shore of Lake Superior in late October and saw the waves, saw the fury of that lake. And I will tell you, any man who gets on a ship and sails that damn thing has got balls like this, man. Like, there is no amount of money in the world that you could pay me to get on a goddamn ship and sail through Lake Superior, bro. Like, it is big, dark, unpredictable, and there's just no way. There's no way.
And if you listen to the song, isn't it, according to the song, he was less than 2 miles from shore or whatever. He just didn't get there.
Yeah. I mean, they call it the Ides of November, and, or the Gales of November or something along that line. But it's true. Like, it comes up, and it is unlike anything you've ever seen or heard, man. The howling of the wind and the waves, it's like standing in the middle of a hurricane, like
Good old Lake Gitchagumi.
Yeah. Like, I didn't realize how terrifying it was until we were up there during it one year, and I sort of stood out there. I stood plenty far back, but even from our vantage point, the wind and the waves hitting the rocks and all of that, I mean, it was terrifying. And I'm like, there's no way in hell I'd actually go in the water for that. And you could see ships sailing. And I'm like, nah, no freaking way, bro. Like, I agree with Gordon Lightfoot. I have him on my list. So
okay, all right. So who's your number 7 or 6? I guess you're 6.
Number 6 was the other band that I didn't realize were Canadian. I knew Levon was from the South. I assumed the rest of the band was as well. I did not realize that the band was Canadian. So the band is number 6.
Well, we've kind of adopted them as Canadian, but if you want to get technical,
I mean, 5 out of 6 of the guys were Canadian, so that makes them Canadian to me.
Good enough.
Levon being the only one who wasn't, and just so many great songs by them. The backing band for, Dylan for a while, and
they were also with Rompin' Ronnie Hawkins.
Yes,
they were
I
involved
said
in
a
that.
couple of other people that they were sort of the backing band for, and very, very accomplished musicians, each and every one of them. So
I always liked Rick Danko. Danko always swing his elbows and be up there.
Yeah, I mean they'd get going. So that's my number 6 is the band.
Yeah, I always liked them. Maybe it's just me, and being Canadian, I get a lot of exposure to him. Robbie Robertson rubs some people the wrong way.
Yeah,
he's a bit, it's my way or the highway kind of deal.
Right.
Very, very much a micromanager, and it doesn't always sit well with everybody.
Right.
But he was in circles with Bob Dylan and Neil Young, like all those guys, Joni Mitchell, like they're all,
So number 5, what do we
My
got?
number 5 is my chance for the Guess Who. and one for their historical. Again, American Woman was the first Canadian song to go number one, probably since Guy Lombardo and his orchestra. But it wasn't just, they weren't just one hit wonders. You listen to No Sugar Tonight, you listen to No Time, you listen to Laughing, you listen to so many. Canned Wheat was their big album. Laughing is a great song. Undone. Their influence, is tough to quantify because they were the one that was storming open the doors. When, Rush was looking for a record label, the only comparable they had up there was like the Five-Man Electrical Band and Guess Who, because there just weren't that many. And they were good boys. Randy Bachman was one heck of again, another one of those underrated guitarists.
Yeah.
Randy Bachman was a big fan of Lenny Breau, and Lenny Breau was a very, very accomplished jazz guitarist. And yeah, it's one of those songs my wife will listen to, my father-in-law will listen to, my dad will listen to. Burton Cummings and Randy Bachman are still out touring now. And I remember during the pandemic, Randy and those guys, they would shoot videos from their house just to keep Canadians or anybody listening to them entertained. They would just sit with his guitar, Randy with his son Tal Bachman, and would play. So yeah, I love the Guess Who. Number 5.
Number 5 for me, you just mentioned him. I have Gordon Lightfoot. Again, as you stated, so many songs. If You Could Read My Mind is one that is kind of sentimental to me. Gordon Lightfoot and Dan Fogelberg are both a set of singer-songwriters that I have a very deep appreciation for. Storytellers, if you will, that wrote songs that maybe they were never going to be pop icons or, rock legends or anything, but they wrote songs that just had such deep meaning. And, even the songs that weren't hits, there was something about them and their voice and the way they sang that just was so mesmerizing, I guess, for lack of a better word. So Gordon and Dan were two guys that I listened to a lot together. I would kind of go from like one record to the next, back and forth between them, because they were kind of similar. Like Dan was kind of like the American version of Gordon in a lot of ways.
Yeah, another musician that was probably a rung below Gord, just in the public knowing of him, as opposed to like the musicians knew him, but like he sold lots of records. And how I know he sold a lot of records is when you go to the thrift shops, there's Fogelberg records out there.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
He sold a lot. The ones I see a lot of are Fogelberg, Anne Murray, and Roger Whittaker. Whole shitload of Roger Whittakers. Well, but also that means he sold a lot, right? So there's something to do it. The other song by Gordy Lightfoot, I don't know if you've heard, he did a song called the Canadian Railroad Trilogy. It's about a 7 or 8 minute history of the Canadian Railroad. And I think I don't know if he was paid for by the government to create it or he just want to whatever, but it's just brilliant.
It was on The Way I Feel, I think.
Gord's Gold, I guess, is his big album, right? Because that was kind of a greatest hits-ish record, Gord's Gold. But I know that the Sundown record with him, they said you always knew you had a good record when it was somebody just sitting still in the front of the album. And
right.
He's just sitting cross-legged in front of a barn with hay around him and what have you. Alrighty.
So number 5 for me is Gordon Lightfoot. Number 4 for you.
Number 4 is one we've alluded to a few times, and that's Bachman Turner Overdrive, BTO. And I put ahead of the Guess Who because they may not have been quite as successful as the Guess Who, but they were more rocking.
Yeah.
They had an edge to them. And I don't know how many times I've heard Let It Ride, but that growl that Fred Turner does, you put the little breadcrumbs together. Does that not sound a little like a death metal? A little. Got a bit of a growl to it there. Yeah. Like you got to really, but taking care of business, looking out for number 1, Let It Ride, Roll On Down the Highway. The reason that Randy Bachman left Guess Who was mainly because Burton Cummings was, a partier, loved the girls, loved the drink, loved the atmosphere, good singer,
right.
But he was Mormon. He didn't drink. He didn't touch the booze. He didn't touch the drugs. He was all about the music. So while Burton was out there getting whatever he was from one of the groupies, he was in there writing the songs. And that's what he was about. So he found guys that kind of believed the same thing he did. And then they just, all their energy went to the music. And, you know, it's like taking care of business has been all over commercials, movies, whatever. But if you deep, their album, Not Fragile, is a fantastic album. I don't want to go on too much. Just listen to BTO.
Yeah. Who are we at? Number 4
Or,
for me, band, for all of the reasons I mentioned earlier. As you alluded to, he was not only a rock guitarist, he was a massive fan of jazz and jazz and New Orleans style music. Ragtime is what I'm thinking of. I had a legendary record collection. I think at one point, I think I heard an interview. His wife said he had over 10,000 records, vinyl records, that were just jazz and ragtime and like Dixieland type of music that were not blues music. And he did a radio show. He had his own radio show that he played all of that music on after, you know, he sort of gravitated away from the performing side a little bit. Died way too early. Really was, you know, I love that his wife still maintains his Facebook page, still posts stuff, still shares memories of him.
I was going to say, I've got him on my feed, and at least once a week, there's something up.
Right.
Some show he played in Belgium in 1998 or something,
Yeah.
you know? Like,
I love that they late last year, I think it was, he redid the Roadhouse songs that were supposed to be on the soundtrack but didn't make it, some that were on the soundtrack. A lot of people don't realize that the Roadhouse soundtrack was supposed to be just Jeff Healey music, and they ended up adding a bunch of other stuff to it. So Jeff recorded like 18 to 20 songs for that soundtrack, and only 3 or 4 of them ended up getting used. So they actually put out the record last year of all of the recordings, all of the songs that they recorded, Jeff Healey Band recorded for that. And it's really a phenomenal record. And I thought would have been a much better soundtrack than what they ended up with. But, you know, movie companies get involved in this, that, and the other thing. And
yeah, when the suits get involved, you usually lose out.
yeah. But, you know, Jeff really was such a unique talent in the sense of he created his own style. And it wasn't an original style. I mean, it really was one that steel lap players had been using for decades, but it had never been
I was going to say the difference is the steel lap guys didn't use it exclusively the entire time across different types of guitar use.
Yeah, it had never been adapted to rock. You know, and what made Jeff unique was, you know, playing the way he did. Your typical guitar player has the reach of 4 fingers. He played like this, so he had the reach of practically 7 or 8 fingers.
But it's awkward though. It's not the normal strumming pattern that you'd normally have.
Right.
Yeah.
But it was just when he played on the neck, his reach was twice what your typical guitar player could play. So he could play notes that your normal guitar player could never play in combination, just because he could reach further with his fingers.
But I mean, you talk about muscle memory.
Yeah.
You'd have to have a good memory period and muscle memory, and how many hours he would have practiced. Like,
yeah.
Oh my gosh.
You know, and again, you know, known for Angel Eyes, known for the Roadhouse, but there were songs like Confidence Man that were just killer rock songs.
There's a song by him that he put out, and I can't find it anymore. It was called Adriana.
Yeah.
And it was shot in with for 50 cents for a video in 1983 of just him basically in an industrial parking lot with some hot chick dancing, and he's playing. But I don't know if it was done on an indie label, because I can't find it at all.
I'm not sure.
No, I remember seeing it.
Yeah, I know there's tons of his stuff out there from different periods and different things, and I admire Jeff. Jeff was one of those guys when he first come out. I didn't really get the hype as much, and then my buddy drugged me to his show. You know, we got to go see it, and I was like, it was a little club show. I think it was at Callahan's in Royal Oak, and it was a blues club, and it was the beginning of his career. It was very shortly after he had put See the Light Out. So he hadn't really caught on big yet and all of that. And it was before Angel Eyes broke. And like I said, they came out on stage and, you know, just tore the place down. And, you know, his band.
Joe Rockman, he's a heck of a
those guys did not get nearly as much credit as they deserved. they were badass in their own right. Like that,
They were
that
good,
rhythm
but
section.
they were good enough to let Jeff kind of steer the ship.
Right.
But at the same time, Jeff always gave them credit, always,
Yeah.
introduced them, made sure everybody knew it wasn't just him up there.
Yeah. But
Yeah.
I mean, they really honestly could have played with anybody and held their own. They really, people talk about Jeff, but you don't hear people mention them nearly enough of
No,
what they
totally agree.
were as part of that band. So Jeff Healey is number 4 for me.
Excellent call. I'm not going to argue with
Number
you one iota. Numero trois, number 3 is one 10 years ago would have been higher. And it's just my evolution of music. But this is somebody I've seen live. This is somebody who's still performing, still touring now, and was out in 1966.
Okay.
And that's one and only Neil Young. I can't not appreciate. He has a show on YouTube from the BBC 1971, and it's absolutely gorgeous. Neil's got his hair down to about his waist. He comes out with a harmonica. Like, it's almost like he's naked on stage because it's just him and either an acoustic guitar, a harmonica, or a piano. And not that many people can pull that off. And
Right.
then go play an electric guitar, play Hurricane. You Are Like a Hurricane, or Cortez the Killer, or one of his big rock and Hey Hey My, and then play Fucking Up. You know, and then go play doo-wop music when he was with the Flaming Pinks, and then go play country music with Willie Nelson, and then go play almost pre-industrial computer with Computer Age. Like he got sued for not sounding enough like Neil Young by his record company because he just spewed stuff out that they thought they put out because he put it out because it wasn't going to sell. Whereas for him, it was just a creative outlet. He's as he's gotten older, he's gotten a bit persnickety, I like to say, like he's cantankerous at times.
Yeah.
But at his age, he's going to say whatever the hell he wants to say.
Yeah. I mean, you kind of hit a point where you earn it, and
he was there with the Vietnam protests. Like that song by CSNY Ohio. He wrote that in half an hour and recorded it within hours of it happening. Zipped it out, and it's one of the most powerful protest songs ever. But the other thing about Neil Young is he had a song come out shortly after 9/11 called Let's Roll, and it's haunting if you've never heard Let's Roll. In the 90s, Mirror Ball, the song Downtown. The one song of his that was popular that I can't stand is Harvest Moon. Oh, I cringe every time I hear Harvest Moon. I'd rather hear Harvest. Don't give me Harvest Moon. But you know what? Neil is one of those guys. He's so prodigious with the amount of music he comes out with. He had complete albums that he sang, recorded, got ready, and shelved. There's a few of them in the vaults of his that when he passes on, I'm sure will come out because he's got a stash of records there up there with Prince. The amount of recordings that are just sitting there. So Neil Young is my number 3.
Nice. Your number 3, you mean?
Yep. Number 3.
Number 3 for me is a guy who I discovered in the early 80s. Thought he was cool. He got cooler and cooler and kind of hit a peak in the early 90s, and then he went way downhill. And now he is starting to make sort of a comeback with the more 80s-ish, 90s style. It's Mr. Bryan Adams.
Oh, Brian. Cuts Like a Knife.
Cuts Like a Knife was one of the first things. But that Waking Up the Neighbors record is that is one of them records that I love that record from top to bottom. Like there's something about that record, man, that it is such a fist pumping.
Is he back on the upswing?
Yeah.
Brian?
So
Are people now rediscovering.
Oh, he put out 2 songs. One was a song that he wrote that Kiss recorded, that it was the B-side for God of Thunder. And people didn't know that he wrote the song because
he wrote a few songs for Kiss.
Yeah.
I think he was friends with Paul Stanley. Something like
so
that. Yeah.
He has released 2 or 3 songs that are much more in the, Cuts Like a Knife vein than the sort of ballad tour he took during the 2000s.
Like if
So
I
he's
if
sort
I
of-
have to hear everything I do for you, I'm leaving the room. I don't want to hear it.
yeah, like he's sort of leaned back into the rock side of things again,
Yeah.
which is cool. But like I said, that Waking Up the Neighbors record for me is a record I still listen to religiously.
I like
It is
the,
pumping.
I like the one he did with Tina Turner. It's only love, and that's
Yeah.
all.
Yeah.
That shows the like in that one he plays a lead guitar. He's got the he started out as a rocker. Have you seen the pictures of
Yeah.
him from high school with the
Mhm.
blonde hair down to his shoulders? And yeah, I think he was
That's
like
what
in
I
a punk.
said.
He
I've
was a
always liked
punk-
Brian. I wasn't a fan so much during the whole, soft rock ballads thing, but
If I
I
have to hear
it-
Summer '69 one more time, because it gets
I don't
played
mind
to
that
death.
song.
It gets played to death.
You know, like I said, it just to me, Waking Up the Neighbors was really the record where he kind of peaked and just really had it all together, man. And obviously, having Mutt Lange produce it probably helped a ton because it was done shortly
Well,
after.
and the other guy he had is Jim Valance writing the songs
Yeah.
with, right? And Jim
Yeah.
Valance had been a member of Saga, or not Saga, Prism. He was in Prism. And so he had the chops. And
Yeah, he had
Brian
some good guys that he played and wrote with and whatnot.
Brian had a song out in the '90s called "We're Gonna Win," which is a
Mhm.
good little ditty if you've never heard it before. But yeah, Brian Adams is again, he's in the rock royalty of Canadian. Even though he wasn't always my style,
Yeah.
you got to respect the work.
Yeah.
Like he gave honest work. Again, like one of these people that fought through the clubs. Didn't have anybody pushing him, had to make his way up, that kind of deal.
Right. So that's my number 3, Brian Adams. Number 2.
Number 2 is a band I can't see you having. I can't see you might even not know them. But this is a band that they say Rush was given to the world by Canada. Canada kept the Tragically Hip for themselves, and that is the Tragically Hip. The Tragically Hip, I can't summarize in 3 minutes. They were a band that started in the clubs of Kingston, Ontario, made their way up through. Songs are very Canadian, very heartfelt. Gord Downey, the lead singer, is your ultimate ADHD kid, but it works to his advantage as the singer of the band. They were a quintessential Canadian band. It's one of those ones you go to their concerts. Oh, there you go. There you go. They were a band that when you went to their concerts, you knew every song or pretty close to, unless they had a new album out.
Right.
For those unfamiliar with, their lead singer, Gord Downey, died of brain cancer. And they had basically said, it's inoperable at this point. There's nothing you can do. Most people would have sat back, spent the last year of their life with their family, sitting at the family cottage. He went on tour.
He did the opposite. He went on tour.
He went on tour and did like a 10 or 12 show tour across Canada. My buddy Gary went to their final show in Kingston, Ontario, was offered $2,000 for his ticket, turned it down. The guys beside him had flown in from Australia. The guys on the other side had flown in from Los Angeles. I think it was a third. Canada has 31 million people at that time. 13 million watched their final concert on television.
Yeah.
Can you imagine an American band having their last concert shown on ABC, NBC, Fox? Like, I can't see that for Van Halen. I can't see that for Aerosmith. I can't see that for fill in the blank band. The Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau, was there. He was friends with them. There were people crying in the audience that last song.
Yeah.
I saw them live twice. Gord Downey was so frenetic, so all over the place in his lyrics. And sometimes it sounds like gibberish, but that was just his thing. And the other thing about it is the band let Gord lead. They stayed in the back. They were fantastic musicians, but they didn't, you don't hear the lead guitarist have a guitar solo other than is necessary for the song. It's just, you listen to, 50 Mission Cap or the album Fully Completely or Trouble at the Hen House or Road Apples or, all of them, Phantom Power. I'm going to stop.
I'm going to echo everything he said. My number 2 is the Tragically Hip.
I'm shocked. I'm very happy. I'm so
I
happy.
can't think. I immediately knew my top 3. Right. As soon as we said Canadian artists, I was like, okay, I know my top 3 just because these are 3 bands that are simply as Canadian could be. 2 and 3 more than number 1. But as you stated, there's not a more Canadian band per se than the Tragically Hip. Like, they lived and died by their Canadian roots. They never really tried to be the band that took over the world. They were perfectly happy being, the Canadian superstars that they were. And, universally respected, universally loved. One of those bands that I can't think of a time I've heard anybody say anything bad about them. Even people who weren't fans of the style respected and admired what they did, because they just sort of carved their own little path through what they did. And
my favorite Hip story was they finally got on Saturday Night Live one year because Dan Aykroyd pushed Lorne Michaels to get him on, both being Canadian. And so the boys were about to come out and play, but they were smoking a bit of the wacky tobacco before they came out. And of course, you were supposed to smoke, so they're standing by the the air filter. But it affected them enough that Gord fumbled the lyrics to the beginning of "We're Tragically Hip." It wasn't supposed to be tragically, but it now almost becomes the song, the lyrics he uses in concert because they became shot out across North America.
Yeah. So number 2, we've agreed on number 2. We've agreed on number 8, and we were pretty close.
Yeah, Helix was on your almost.
Yeah, and we both had Gordon Lightfoot.
And Jeff Healey.
You had 6 and me at 5, and I had Healy at 4, and you had him at 7. So we've been
fairly consistent,
pretty dead on. Who is? Oh, I didn't write that down. I was like, wait, not Tragically Hip.
Tragically Hip. That's it.
Yeah, guess I better learn to type, huh? So do I need to ask who your number 1 is? Because I kind of know, and it was kind of a given. So
no, it's Rush, and it's not even close.
Yeah,
I absolutely adore the band. Always have. I live 45 minutes east of where they were from. They were all over the radio all the time, but they were one of those bands that complained Gordy, Lightfoot, Anne Murray, of getting overplayed by the Canadian radio because there are only so many bands that got played all the bloody time. But the musicianship of Neil Peart, Geddy Lee, and Alex Lifeson, who always kind of gets thrown under there. Alex Lifeson to himself is phenomenal.
Right.
And I mean, I'm not going to go over all those songs. My all-time greatest album is 2112. Love that album. Moving Pictures is a prog rock classic. Although I argue it's not really prog rock at that point in their career. It was almost more synthy than it was proggy. Although that again, that's kind of two people that were in bed together anyways. But their musicianship, and they're such good people. Like, the Canadian government made them Order of Canada. Geddy Lee donated. Geddy Lee's a huge fan of wine and of baseball. And he had such a large baseball collection that he donated a whole bunch of them to the Negro Baseball Hall of Fame. He's got season tickets for the Toronto Blue Jays and sits behind home plate. Neil, you could argue, is the greatest rock and roll drummer of all time. Now, fans of John Bonham, Ginger Baker, Keith Moon, right. Yeah, I mean, they're going to have their, and it's like picking what's your favorite type of wine or whatever, But, and Alex Lifeson, it's funny, they got a song called Passage to Bangkok that's on 2112. And he goes, it's all about the drug trade in Asia. And Alex is known for being outgoing and having a good sense of humor. And he goes, when I get near the crowd and I play a solo near the beginning of the crowd, you get all these funny smells coming out of the crowd. And Alex said, I didn't mind it. I mean, he wakes and bakes with the rest of them, right? But to me, I've never had a point in my life where I can't sit and listen to Rush. Now, do I love all their songs? No. They've had so many songs, you're not going to love all of them. But I saw them live, I can't remember, 5 or 6 times. You will never see a band put on a better live performance than Rush. You wouldn't. You get 2.5 hours of everything they got. And I mean, earlier in their career, I wish I would have been old enough to see them, because they, on one tour, they had Rory Gallagher open for them. They've had Primus open for them. They've had Mr. Big open for them for a while. They opened for Kiss. They became great friends with Kiss. Ace Frehley and Neil Peart really synced together. And he said Aerosmiths were real dicks to them when they were younger. An up-and-coming band. He said Aerosmith wouldn't even give them any time to rehearse beforehand or give them like a shitty dressing room. Kiss always let them do whatever they needed. So like, if you're looking for an underrated song by them, look up a song called Lakeside Park, especially the live version on All the World's a Stage. Oh, it'll bring tears to your eyes. Just brilliant. And I like the rawness. So to me, Rush is Canada. I mean, there's a reason why right now the Molson Canadian commercials are playing Fly By Night as the music. So, yeah, for the hockey playoffs, Chris, for the hockey playoffs, the local, the national channel has Triumph, Lay It on the Line, and then the beer commercial has Fly By Night. So,
So
yeah.
in 1989, I was attending Saginaw Valley State University. I needed a part-time job. So I went down to the campus job board, and there was a listing there for planetarium assistant. The school had its own planetarium. And I thought, I like outer space. I love that type of thing. So I applied for it and met the director of the planetarium. He was also the head of the physics department. He goes, well, go on upstairs to the planetarium. Rod's up there. Rod will introduce you, blah, blah, blah. Rod was another student. I go up there, I knock on the door. The door opens, and just Tom Sawyer just blasts me in the face when he opens the door. And I'm like, Jesus, dude, you got that loud enough? And he's never too loud. And the planetarium was soundproofed, and it had the big dome and had its own sound system. It was this massive, theater type sound system. So you could close the door and you could crank the music as loud as you wanted when you weren't doing the planetarium things. Rod was a massive Rush fan, and I was kind of like, okay. So we're in there working one day, and I was in there working. He comes in and he goes, do you like Rush? And they're okay. I mean, not really my favorite, but I don't hate them, just not something I would listen to intentionally. Why? And he goes, I've got concert tickets. He goes, now I don't have anybody to go with. So he goes, you want to go see Rush with me? And I was kind of like, not really. It's like, who's the opening band? And he's like, some band called Mr. Big. Now, I knew Mr. Big. I was a huge fan of Mr. Big. So I was like, I'm in. I wanted to see Mr. Big. Didn't give a shit about Rush. I wanted to see Mr. Big. So we went to
What was their big song?
Addicted to That Rush.
Okay.
For Mr. Big. Addicted to That Rush. It was their first record. And it was the tour for Presto. It was a Presto tour.
Presto. Yeah, 89, 90.
Yeah, it was 89. And I had a new respect for Rush after seeing them live. Again, musically, I don't mind Rush. It's really Geddy's voice to me that a little is a lot for me. Like Geddy kind of has that voice that just after a while, I kind of
there's no middle ground on it. Either you like it or you don't. Like
I'm kind of middle ground with Geddy. Like there's certain songs I really like Roll the Bones. Like there's something about that record, the tone of that record. I dig that record. And I love the bass playing. I love the music side of it, but his voice really is kind of, and Sting's another one. Robert Plant is another one that just kind of in small doses, that
they asked Kim Mitchell once, what about Geddy's voice? And they said, somebody in the newspaper referred to it as Mickey Mouse on helium.
So yeah, I respect Rush. I expected it to be Rush. I'm not a big enough fan to say, if I was doing this strictly based on nothing other than impact record sales and no personal opinion, then yes, Rush would probably be my number one as well. But my number one is one you mentioned a long time ago. They are my favorite Canadian band. I listen to them religiously. A massive fan. One of the first concerts I ever got to see was them. That is Triumph.
Follow your heart.
Yes,
on the line.
Just that guitar riff and Lay It on the Line, man. It's just there's something about their music that I really love. Triumph. And
you don't expect that voice coming out of Rick. You don't.
Yeah. And Rick again is a guitar player who is grossly underrated. Like you never see him on lists of greatest guitar player, but people forget that Rick is a monster guitar player in both the rock and jazz sides of things, just like Jeff was. So I knew immediately when you said this list, my number one was going to be Triumph. That was never in question. The rest of it was kind of fluid a little bit, but I knew Tragically Hip was going to be way high just because
I fully expected you to say Nickelback.
I had them on my list at one point, and I respect Nickelback.
Yeah,
I
I
don't
don't,
think
I don't shit on them like everyone else does. My only complaint about them is it kind of sounds generic at times.
a little bit, but like I said, I have a lot more respect for them than other people. I don't think they're nearly as terrible as people make them out to be.
Oh no, I don't think they're terrible. I did again.
You know,
It just kind of you put in one album and you've heard four of them. Although you could say that for AC/DC too, right?
yeah. I mean, yeah. So before we make this overly long, we're gonna wrap this up. Sir, tell them, where do they find you? What do they search up to find your websites, podcasts, or other assorted random?
Random bits on the interweb.
Yes.
Yes. So you can, if you like what I'm hearing, or you're hearing from me, or if you don't, I don't care if you like it or not. Just listen to Land of the Creeps, LOTC, podcast for horror movies and reviews. If you want some more social commentary, music, movies, sports, and stuff, that will get you what you need. You can email me. I'm on Facebook. I'm on MeWe. I'm on Blue Sky. I'm on Threads. Just find me. I'm around. If you type my name into YouTube, you'll find some random clip of me talking about something. So, and it's funny, Chris, you were talking about Triumph and you do music reactions. Well, I don't know how many times I've seen somebody who's never heard of Triumph, who's some classically trained musician, see them at the US Festival and they're just blown away.
Yeah.
They're just, there's one woman, she's like an opera singer and her jaw just about dropped listening to that, you know? So anyways, I hope everybody has themselves a good time. Let's be happy. Let's be good people. Elbows up and enjoy the weather.
And as always, you know how I end it. Be well. Treat each other with kindness. Remember that music heals.